She cheated on me. So I took everything in the divorce and left her with nothing. For years, I thought we were happy. I wasn't just married, I was in love with my wife, my partner. We had built a life together, a solid foundation of laughter, shared dreams, and what I believed was unwavering trust. Sure, we had our arguments, but who doesn't? At the end of the day, I always felt secure in the knowledge that we'd chosen each other, that we were in this for the long haul. I never imagined she could betray me. That thought wasn't even in my vocabulary, until it was. It started as a nagging feeling, a quiet, insistent whisper in the back of my mind. Her late nights at work became more frequent, her explanations less detailed. She'd come home distracted, avoiding eye contact or giving half-hearted smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Her phone, once casually left on the coffee table or kitchen counter, was now always with her, face down, locked, and guarded like it contained state secrets. At first, I brushed it off. She's under a lot of stress, I told myself. She just needs space. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. The alternative, her hiding something from me, was too painful to even consider. But the signs kept piling up. She started working out more, dressing differently, wearing perfume on random errands. She seemed happier when she wasn't around me, like she was carrying a secret that only she could enjoy. The breaking point came one night when she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. I wasn't snooping, not at first. I went to grab my keys and accidentally bumped her phone, lighting up the screen. A single text caught my eye. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." My heart stopped. My hands started to shake as I stared at the words, disbelief clawing at my chest. I told myself it could be innocent. Maybe it was a friend, a joke, something I didn't understand. But when I scrolled further, the truth hit me like a freight train. Messages, photos, emails, evidence of a relationship that had been going on for months. Dinner dates, hotel rooms, whispered promises, all with someone she'd casually referred to as her colleague. I sat there for what felt like hours, the air around me thick and suffocating. My world, my marriage, my trust, it all crumbled in an instant. When she walked out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel and her face lit with an innocent smile, I felt like a stranger was standing in front of me. I didn't say anything that night. I couldn't. The betrayal was too fresh, the wound too raw. Instead, I retreated into myself, my thoughts a chaotic storm of anger, hurt, and confusion. In the days that followed, I became a man on a mission. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed time to think, to process, to plan. Confronting her would lead to tears, excuses, and manipulations, and I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I focused on gathering evidence. If this was going to end, and I knew deep down it would, I wasn't going to let her twist the story or walk away unscathed. I went through her phone whenever I had the chance, taking screenshots of texts, forwarding emails to myself, even tracking the GPS history on her car. Every piece of evidence I found felt like another stab in the heart, but I couldn't stop. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before. The way she'd smile at her phone, the way she'd absent-mindedly hum a tune I didn't recognize. It all felt like a cruel joke, like I'd been living in a lie while she built a second life behind my back. The worst part was pretending everything was fine. Sitting across from her at dinner, listening to her talk about her day, I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I stayed silent, biding my time. It wasn't just anger fueling me, it was a deep, unrelenting need for justice. She had betrayed me in the most personal, devastating way possible, and I wasn't going to let her walk away without facing the consequences. The first step in my plan was her job. She loved her career, often bragging about how respected she was in her workplace. But I knew her company had strict policies against workplace relationships, especially ones that could create conflicts of interest. I drafted an anonymous email to her boss, attaching the most damning evidence I had, screenshots of flirty messages and photos of her and her colleague. I framed it as a concern for the company's professionalism and judgment, knowing it would spark an investigation. Next, I turned to her social circle. She had always been the golden girl among our friends, charming, funny, and seemingly loyal. I knew that image was about to shatter. I made sure the evidence, accidentally, found its way into the hands of the most talkative people in our group. Within days, the rumors started to spread. Text messages turned into whispers, whispers turned into gossip, and soon enough, her once tight-knit group of friends began to distance themselves from her. But that wasn't enough. Her family had always been a big part of her life. Her parents adored her, her siblings looked up to her. They needed to know the truth. I mailed them a package anonymously, containing screenshots, photos, and a letter detailing her affair. Her mother called me in tears, apologizing profusely for her daughter's actions. Her father, a stern and principled man, was furious. "This is not the daughter I raised," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. As her life started to unravel, I watched from the sidelines, equal parts heartbroken and vindicated. She had taken everything from me, and now, she was paying the price. The fallout from my plan came faster than I expected. Her perfect life, her career, her friendships, her family relationships, was crumbling before her eyes. And she had no idea why. It started with her job. She came home one day looking pale and shaken, her usually confident demeanor replaced by uncertainty. "They've started an investigation at work," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Some anonymous complaint about unprofessional behavior." "Oh no," I said, feigning concern. "What kind of unprofessional behavior?" She waved it off, trying to sound nonchalant, but I could see the cracks forming. "It's nothing. Probably just someone trying to cause trouble." But as the days went on, her anxiety grew. She spent hours on the phone with HR, pacing the living room as she tried to defend herself. Then came the day she couldn't talk her way out of it anymore. "They fired me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were red from crying, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "They said it was a violation of company policy. They wouldn't even let me explain." I bit back a smile and wrapped my arms around her in a half-hearted hug. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, even as a small part of me felt satisfied. Her friends were next. The gossip spread like wildfire, and before long, the invitations stopped coming. The group chats she once dominated fell silent, and her once loyal friends began to pull away. I overheard her on the phone with one of them, pleading for understanding. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, just let me explain." But whatever explanation she offered wasn't enough. She hung up the phone, tears streaming down her face. "They don't believe me," she said, her voice choked with emotion. They think I'm a terrible person." I didn't respond. What could I say? The final blow came from her family. She had always been close with her parents, visiting them regularly and calling them every weekend. But after receiving the package I sent, they were livid. Her father stopped taking her calls altogether. Her mother, always the more forgiving of the two, called her once, but the conversation didn't go well. I heard snippets of it through the thin walls of our bedroom. "How could you do this to him? To us?" her mother said, her voice trembling with disappointment. "We raised you better than this." "I made a mistake," my wife replied, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to happen." But her mother wasn't swayed. By the end of the call, my wife was sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands. I knew it was only a matter of time before her lover abandoned her, too. Their relationship was built on secrecy and excitement, not stability or love. When her life started to fall apart, he would have no reason to stick around. And I was right. She came home one night looking utterly defeated. Her usual spark was gone, replaced by a dull emptiness. She didn't say anything at first, just dropped her bag on the floor and collapsed onto the couch. "He left me," she said finally, her voice barely audible. I pretended not to hear her. "What was that?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "He ended it. Said he couldn't handle the drama." She let out a bitter laugh. "Guess I wasn't worth the trouble." I didn't respond. What was there to say? The night she showed up at my door, I wasn't surprised. I had seen it coming. The desperation in her eyes, the way she clung to me even as everything else fell apart. She had lost everything. Her job, her friends, her lover, even the respect of her family. I was all she had left. She stood there on the doorstep, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I can't do this without you. I need you." For a moment, I just stared at her, letting her words hang in the air. Then, finally, I spoke. "You made your choices," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Now you have to live with them." Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry. Please, just give me another chance." I felt a pang of something, pity, maybe, or regret. But it wasn't enough to change my mind. "I loved you," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "I gave you everything I had, and it still wasn't enough for you. I deserve better than this. Better than you." With that, I closed the door. Walking away from her wasn't easy. Despite everything, a part of me still loved her, still mourned the life we had built together. But I knew I couldn't move forward if I let her back in. In the months that followed, I focused on myself. I started going to therapy, where I learned to process my anger and pain in healthy ways. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into work, and even picked up a few new hobbies. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my life. I started dating again, though it wasn't easy. Trust didn't come naturally anymore, and I found myself second-guessing everything. But over time, I learned to let go of the fear, to remind myself that not everyone was like her. I haven't seen her since that night. Sometimes, I wonder what became of her, if she ever managed to pick up the pieces of her life. But those thoughts are fleeting, like shadows that disappear in the light of day. This experience taught me a lot about myself, about my strength, my resilience, and my capacity for forgiveness. Not for her, but for myself. For the mistakes I made, for the blind trust I placed in someone who didn't deserve it. In the end, I came out of this stronger, more self-aware, and more determined to never settle for less than I deserve. And as for her, well, some lessons are learned the hard way.